What if Finnick Odair betrayed the rebellion? A Hunger Games alternate reality story. What if the events of the Hunger Games had unfolded differently? What if one secret, one threat, or one impossible choice changed the fate of Katniss Everdeen and every person fighting against the Capitol? Sometimes, betrayal does not begin with greed or hatred. Sometimes, it begins with love. What if President Snow discovered the rebellion before the 75th Hunger Games? What if he imprisoned Annie Cresta and threatened to destroy her unless Finnick Odair became his informant? What if Finnick only pretended to join the Rebel Alliance? Would he protect Annie? Would he save the Capitol? And what would remain of him after everyone who trusted him was gone? This is a glimpse into another reality, one in which the Capitol learns the rebellion's plan before the Quarterquell. Finnick becomes President Snow's most valuable spy, and Panem's greatest symbol of charm becomes the man who destroys its final hope. The victor with too many secrets. For years, Finnick Odair had survived by pretending. He pretended to enjoy the Capitol's parties. He pretended the expensive gifts mattered. He pretended the powerful citizens who purchased his company were interesting, desirable, and safe. Behind every smile, Finnick listened. Capitol officials whispered about military movements, political rivalries, hidden crimes, and President Snow's methods of control. They revealed their secrets because they believed Finnick was nothing more than a beautiful victor. Finnick remembered everything. The secrets became his weapons. When Plutarch Heavensby quietly approached him about a growing rebellion, Finnick agreed almost immediately. He had spent years waiting for a chance to strike back against the government that had turned his victory into another kind of prison. The rebellion promised freedom for the districts. More importantly, it promised freedom for Annie Cresta. Annie had survived the Hunger Games, but the arena never truly released her. Sudden sounds frightened her. Crowds overwhelmed her. Some days she seemed to disappear into memories no one else could see. Finnick remained patient. Annie was the one person around whom he did not need to perform. He believed that if the rebellion succeeded, they could finally live without President Snow deciding when they met, where they traveled, or whether they were allowed to survive. That belief made Finnick careless. He began carrying messages between Plutarch, Beatty, Haymitch, and the hidden representatives of District 13. He used Capitol gatherings to identify military weaknesses and passed information through coded gifts. He did not know that one of those gifts had been opened. President Snow discovered the rebellion months before the Quarterquell. He did not arrest Finnick immediately. Snow understood that a frightened spy was more useful than a dead traitor. Annie's prison Finnick returned to his Capitol apartment after a celebration honoring the upcoming Quarterquell. The rooms were dark. He called Annie's name. No one answered. A white rose waited on the table. Finnick stopped breathing. A screen on the wall activated. Annie appeared in a small room with no windows. She sat on the floor with her arms wrapped around her knees. Two peacekeepers stood behind her. President Snow entered Finnick's apartment. "You victors often mistake access for freedom," he said. Finnick turned slowly. "Let her go." Snow examined the rose. "You have been passing information to Plutarch Heavensby." Finnick said nothing. "You have also communicated with BT, Johanna Mason, Haymitch Abernathy, and several citizens who believe District 13 still exists." Finnick forced himself to smile. "You already know everything. Why ask me?" "Because I know pieces." Snow stepped closer. "You will give me the rest." Finnick looked toward Annie on the screen. "If I refuse?" Snow nodded toward one of the peacekeepers. The man approached Annie. She began screaming before he touched her. Finnick moved toward the screen. "Stop." Snow raised one hand. The peacekeeper stepped back. "You will enter the Quarterquell," Snow said. "You will remain close to Katniss Everdeen, learn the rebels' complete plan, and ensure that she does not leave the arena." Finnick's expression hardened. "You want me to kill her?" "Only if necessary." Snow smiled. "A public betrayal would be more valuable." Finnick looked at Annie again. "How do I know you will release her?" "You do not." Snow placed the rose in Finnick's hand. "That uncertainty will keep you useful." The Quarterquell. The announcement for the 75th Hunger Games came several days later. The tributes would be selected from the existing victors. The rebellion had expected Snow to target Katniss, but it had not anticipated that every district would lose another champion. Finnick's name was the only one placed in District 4's male bowl. Annie's name could have been selected for the women. Instead, Mags volunteered before Annie could be taken to the stage. Finnick stared at Mags. She smiled at him with the same quiet kindness she had shown since he was a child. Mags believed she was saving Annie. Finnick knew Annie was already a prisoner. During their final meeting before the capital train departed, Finnick was allowed to see Annie for 5 minutes. Peacekeepers remained in the room. Annie rushed into his arms. "I thought you were gone." Finnick held her tightly. Snow watched through a camera. Annie pulled back. "They keep asking me about the Mockingjay." Finnick glanced toward the peacekeepers. "Do not tell them anything. I do not know anything. That is why you are safe." Annie studied his face. "You are lying." Finnick smiled automatically. He had smiled that way for years. Annie knew the difference. "What are you going to do?" Finnick touched her cheek. "Come back to you." He could not tell her what that promise might require. The false alliance. On the train to the capital, Mags slept while Finnick studied the planned rebel alliance. Plutarch had arranged for several victors to protect Katniss inside the arena. BT would find a way to break the force field. District 13 would send a hovercraft once the arena's defenses failed. Katniss was to be rescued at any cost. Peeta would be saved if possible. Johanna, BT, Wyrus, Mags, and Finnick had all accepted roles in the operation. Only Finnick had changed sides. Snow had ordered him to learn the extraction location, the timing of the rescue, and the identities of everyone involved. Finnick could not simply expose the plan immediately. If Snow arrested the rebels before the games, Annie would remain a hostage forever. Snow wanted something larger. He wanted the rebellion to reveal itself. Then he intended to destroy it in a single night. During training, Finnick approached Katniss. He offered her a sugar cube and smiled while she watched him suspiciously. "You should consider allies," he said. "I do not trust anyone here. You trust Peeta. That is different." Finnick looked toward Peeta across the room. Snow had explained that Peeta was useful. If Peeta survived long enough, he could be used to control Katniss. Finnick turned back to her. "It is always different until the arena begins." Katniss walked away. Finnick maintained his smile. Inside, he wondered whether Annie was still alive. The interviews. During the final interviews, the victors attempted to turn the capital audience against the Quarter Quell. Johanna Mason demanded to know why the victors were being punished after giving the capital everything it asked of them. BT suggested that the games might be illegal. Peeta announced that Katniss was pregnant. The audience erupted. Finnick stood behind the stage and watched the plan work. The victors joined hands before the cameras. For one brief moment, the district saw them united. In the original story, this moment demonstrated that even the victors had become enemies of the capital. In this reality, Finnick was holding Katniss's hand while serving President Snow. Snow watched from his mansion. He knew the alliance was a lie. So did Finnick. That night, Finnick returned to his room and found a new recording of Annie. She was asleep on the floor. A bruise marked one side of her face. Finnick struck the wall hard enough to split his knuckles. A message appeared beneath the image. "Continue." The clock arena Finnick rose into an arena surrounded by water. The cornucopia stood at the center, and 12 sections of jungle extended around it like the face of a clock. Katniss stood on a nearby platform. Peeta was farther away. When the gong sounded, Finnick reached the cornucopia first. He recovered his trident, supplies, and a flotation belt. He found Katniss before she reached Peeta. She drew an arrow. "Haymitch," Finnick said. He showed her the gold bracelet that proved Haymitch wanted them allied. Katniss lowered the bow but did not trust him. That was useful. Finnick needed to remain believable. Peeta reached them moments later. The Alliance entered the jungle. Finnick knew that Snow wanted Katniss alive until the rebels attempted their rescue. If she died too soon, Plutarch might cancel the operation. Finnick therefore protected her. He killed attacking tributes. He led the group away from the beach. Peeta and the force field. Peeta moved ahead of the group while cutting through vines. His knife struck the invisible force field. Light exploded around him. Peeta was thrown backward. Katniss reached him first. He was not breathing. Finnick knelt beside him. For one terrible second, Finnick considered doing nothing. Snow had not ordered Peeta's death, but losing him would weaken Katniss. A broken Katniss might be easier to manipulate. Then Finnick remembered Annie. He remembered finding her after her games, trembling, and unable to recognize where she was. Peeta's death would destroy Katniss in the same way. Finnick began pressing against Peeta's chest. Katniss shouted at him to stop, believing he was attacking. Finnick continued. He forced air into Peeta's lungs. Peeta gasped. Katniss pushed Finnick aside and held Peeta. Relief crossed her face. Finnick watched them together. In the original story, saving Peeta helped Katniss understand that Finnick was a genuine ally. That happened here as well. The difference was that Finnick had saved Peeta partly because Snow wanted him alive. Katniss thanked him later. Finnick could barely look at her. Mags. The poisonous fog forced the group deeper into the jungle. Finnick carried Mags, but Peeta could no longer move quickly enough. Katniss struggled to support him. Mags understood that one person was slowing everyone down. She kissed Finnick and walked into the fog. Finnick shouted after her. The poison surrounded Mags. Her cannon sounded. Finnick fell to his knees. Mags had raised him, mentored him, and volunteered to protect Annie. She died believing Finnick was helping the rebellion. Katniss placed a hand on his shoulder. I am sorry. Finnick looked at her. He almost confessed everything. He wanted to tell Katniss about Annie, Snow, and the plan to destroy District 13. Then he imagined the Peacekeeper approaching Annie again. Finnick stood. We need to move. The betrayal continued. Finnick has earned their trust, but his greatest betrayal is still ahead. Return for Part 2.